Sisters and brothers from all across the world, with gratitude I begin for giving me a rare opportunity to wish good morning, good afternoon, and good evening at the same time to conscious global citizens joining in from different time zones spread over 6 countries. To conscious global citizens everywhere in this world, I am Devender Singh from West Bengal, the land of Saint Jaidev, Tagore, Swami Vivekanand, Nazrul, Jagdish Chandra Bose, and several other visionaries. The land of Subhash Chandra Bose, whose exemplary leadership freed humanity from the clutches of perpetuating injustice in South Asia. Today is his birthday. May his spirit of standing for right with all the might be our guiding force. Subhash Chandra Bose said, "They call me a dreamer. I confess I'm a dreamer. I have always been a dreamer, even when I was a child. The progress of the world has depended on dreamers and their dreams, not dreams of exploitation and aggrandizement and perpetuating injustice, but dreams of progress, happiness for the widest masses, liberty and independence for all nations." I'm sure all the members of the Boston Pledge and every sane person on this planet share this dream. And for such a cause, for such a dream, we all have gathered here. In the words of the chairman, Dr. Partha Ghosh, it is a dream for economically, ecologically, and ethically resilient world. On behalf of the Boston Pledge, I humbly welcome you all to the first session of the 20th anniversary conference series of the Boston Pledge, uncovering the hidden assets of South Asia to trigger bottom-up socio-economic surge. Ladies and gentlemen, now, before I hand over the podium to the architect of this session, Mr. Vijay Narang, senior member of the Boston Pledge, who has held several leadership positions with multinationals in South Asia and has helped in setting up a very successful startup, Toast Inc. in USA. To know more about the Boston Pledge, let us watch a 2 minutes video. May I now request Shantanu to play the video.
Time to give back to the society, and in this pursuit, the Boston Pledge provides an ideal platform for committing and sharing expertise, knowledge, and resources that we have acquired over the years.
I have been part of the Boston Pledge journey over the past 20 years. Looking forward to work with you to make the world a better place for all of us.
A paradigm shift, political, social, economic crisis, and a path forward for the base of the pyramid.
Congratulations to the Boston Pledge for its 20 years of existence, creating awareness in people about their inherent power to face the challenges of socio-economic disparity.
Paradigms shifted, ecology redefined, pledges strengthened, such as the Boston Pledge, Renaissance Manifest.
Boston Pledge is a mission and a movement to connect and add value to the bottom of the pyramid in South Asia. This effort is on for the last 20 years, and I'm very proud to be associated with it.
The Boston Pledge puts together brains from all over the world to discuss about profound educational ideas that matter, identify best practices, and strive to implement them through action-oriented dialogues.
To me, the Boston Pledge is a movement of conscious global citizens working for people, planet, and culture for a sustainable world in the pursuit of inner excellence.
At the core, the Boston Pledge is all about self-discovery, self-expression, self-realization as we work towards a more equitable, eco-friendly, and ethical world.
Now, respectfully over to you, Mr. Narang.
Thank you, Devinder, for brilliantly introducing the Boston Pledge. Devinder is a social entrepreneur creating sustainable livelihood opportunities in rural India, a technologist making technology work for base of the pyramid, and has very successfully spearheaded the Boston Pledge EDSP program to shape the fundamentals of education globally. My greetings to the esteemed panelists and the respected members of the audience. First, a few words on my personal journey. Born in Multan, which is now in Pakistan, survived the partition Holocaust, a national that resulted in extensive travel in the length and breadth of the South Asia, from Kohima in the east to Karachi in the west, and from Srinagar in the north to Colombo in the west, in the south, which provided me with a deep understanding of the fractious South Asia. 15 years back, I relocated to the USA, and my travel bug took me to several countries around the world that allowed me with an in-depth view of the region from the outside as well. It hugely pains me to see that South Asia, which at one time was the fountainhead of the world culture, science, and technology, and held a colossal 25% share of the global trade, is today struggling and languishing at the bottom of the table on most parameters of human development. And its share of the global trade has plummeted to 2.5%. This pain and concern has motivated us to initiate a debate on what is holding back South Asia, for which our hearts throb. Hopefully, this seminar will initiate a movement for, as the title suggests, uncovering the hidden assets of South Asia to trigger a bottoms-up socio-economic surge. I will now play a video that journeys through the past, present, and the potential of the South Asia. hope you enjoyed the video. And I must convey my huge thanks to Pradeep Ghosh, who happens to be the son of Mr. Partha Ghosh, for his painstaking effort to develop this video in a very short period of time. Now I have the great pleasure to introduce Anjum Malik, a rising star from Pakistan, a social scientist by training, an implementation strategist by profession, and a performance artist by passion. She is currently spearheading the communication strategy of the EU-funded Success Program in Sindh, Pakistan, which aims to empower and uplift the poor rural women in the backyard of Pakistan. Over to Anjum.
Thank you, Mr. Narang. Greetings, salam, namaste, and good evening from Islamabad. It's truly a pleasure to be part of this conference, and I thank you all for having me. I've been given the distinct honor of introducing a modern-day Renaissance man who is known by many names. He is hailed as a global policy advisor, an economic innovator, a visionary leader, an esteemed professor, and an ardent public servant. He also goes by the name of Dr. Partha Ghosh. Please join me in welcoming on screen the chairman of the Boston Pledge, Dr. Partha Ghosh.
Thank you, Anjum. Thank you indeed. What a privilege, what a pleasure to be in midst of stars from all over the world. It is a very divine duty that we have placed in front of us. On one side, when we looked at the video, we looked at the beauty of the subcontinent, between the hills of the Himalayas to the ocean, Indian Ocean, between Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea. On the other side, it is a fact, as Mr. Rang was talking about, we are living in a very difficult times. As you could see, millions of children are still struggling to find food on the streets and roads of South Asia. So time has come for us to think of what could be the new kind of ferment you could create between the Himalayas to the Indian Ocean, so that indeed, what our ancestors created over a period of 5,000 years, we do not destroy that. We build on that to create a world which the world would look up to. So in that spirit, it is a great privilege to be with you and be able to speak on the subject later, but we have more important people with us today. They have greater thoughts, bigger thoughts. So I've got two very special guests. First, I'd like to introduce a very good friend of mine, someone who guides me. If you want to know the term Renaissance, if you want to know the person Leonardo da Vinci, Sam Pitroda comes to my mind. Dr. Sam Pitroda is not only a technologist who reformed different components of India, worked with three prime ministers from Mrs. Gandhi to Rajiv Gandhi to Manmohan Singh, created the Knowledge Commission, wrote several books. And when I go to his basement, I only see paintings. I wonder where does he get all this time to move around the world at the same time, express his thoughts through paintings. So he's the Leonardo da Vinci of modern times. He has got several patents, and he has thought about the region from left to right, from bottom to up. So whichever way you look at Sam has got a lot to offer. So I'm so glad that, Sam, you could join us today. So first I'll invite you, and then I go to my another dear friend, which I'll talk about a bit later. So Sam, to you.
Thank you, Partha. Greetings from Chicago. It is indeed a special privilege and honor for me to be with you to celebrate 20th year of Boston Pledge. I was there 20 years ago when the Boston Pledge was launched in Boston. My compliments to Partha Ghosh, not only for launching this great, unique initiative, but also to be able to sustain for 20 years. It is indeed an accomplishment. Thank you, Partha. for putting your heart and mind into it and bringing it to a level where Boston Pledge is today. I'm delighted that we have people from South Asia, because I strongly believe that South Asia could be a beacon for the world if we all come together. Unfortunately, Corona crisis has put a lot of things on the back burner. It has created another major challenge and added to the difficult journey we have had in the past. Like all of us, I've been also thinking about what next. And Corona crisis has given us some time to review, reflect, reassess. And in the last 10 months, since we are all locked up in our homes, this has really given us a different perspective as to not only our own career and life, but also the model of development. In my case, my background is telecom, and I see world through hyperconnectivity. For the first time in the human history, we are all connected. All 8 billion people are connected. What does this connectivity really mean to the world? Never in the history we had this opportunity before. So one approach is to use hyperconnectivity to go on exploiting the world we have exploited in the past, where rich become richer, top-down development continue, and disparity increase. Another approach is to use hyperconnectivity to reset and redesign the world. So I have spent last 6-7 years thinking about these things, and Corona crisis gave me a chance to put all this together in my own mind. Not that I'm right, not that I have answers, not that I have come up with something unique, but I thought it would be a good idea to share with you in next 4 or 5 minutes some of these thoughts. The world was last designed after World War II, led by the US, which gave birth to UN, World Bank, IMF, NATO, WTO, GDP, GNP, per capita income, balance of payment, trade deficit, and all of that. That design was predominantly based on democracy, human rights, capitalism, consumption, and military. I very sincerely believe that with hyperconnectivity, that design is obsolete. What we see today is the stress in the minds of people. Because of connectivity, we are all connected. We are all empowered. Knowledge has been democratized. Institutions need to be decentralized. And people are empowered through this new connectivity. And people in power feel very uncomfortable with this idea of democratization, decentralization, and to some extent, demonetization of services, whether it is education, health, transport, or whatever. In this hyper-connected world, we need a new paradigm. So when I look at last design about 75 years ago, just about the time some of us were born, I find that 7 key events started changing the design. First was India-led decolonization. Second, rise of China, fall of Soviet Union, rise of technology, rise of inequality, 9/11, and finally COVID-19. These events tell me that the design needs to be rethought through, because we have created a world which is full of inequality. We have created a world where environment has been affected substantially. We tend to produce goods for people who want and not people who need. Wealth is concentrated in the hands of very few. Democratic countries are not really democratic. People's voices are not heard. And today, democracy all over the world is challenged. Institutions are not independent. Authoritarian tendencies have increased. And to me, it is a knee-jerk reaction to hyperconnectivity. At the end of the day, only two things matter: planet and people. What do we do for the planet to make sure that we recognize we are part of a very complex, interconnected system where everyone has right and we can't encroach on other people's territory? Rights, freedom, respect, dignity, equality, all of these things become very critical in a hyper-connected world. So today, if we really focus on planet and people, look at what happened with Black Lives Matter. Look at what happened recently on Capitol Hill. All of these things have to do with dividing societies. What is going on in India bothers me a great deal, where democratic institutions are hijacked, people are being divided, and hyperconnectivity must come to rescue. When I started my work on telecom in India, we had 2 million phones. It used to take 10 years to get a telephone connection. Today, we are a nation of a connected billion. That South Asia should also use hyperconnectivity to really improve our relationships with neighbors, develop peace, trade, prosperity, movement for everybody. So the new design, according to me, really need to create new institutions, new way of doing things. In last 75 years, we have not created one single new global institution. We still try to fix the world with World Bank, IMF, UN, NATO, WTO, as opposed to creating new institutions and new forms of resolving conflicts. So I believe democracy has to go to inclusion. I believe basic human rights have to go to basic human needs. The capitalist economy has to be transformed to new regenerative economy where environment and human capital play an important role. We need to focus less on consumption and more on conservation and sustainability. And I believe finally time has come for us to promote non-violence. You cannot afford to spend $2 trillion a year on military hardware in a hyper-connected world. These are some of the ideas I've been exploring. It does require people like all of you in this group to really begin new conversation. I think our conversation is old. Our conversation is to some extent based on the same ideas we had with little tweaking here, little tweaking there. We need a completely new conversation. And I believe people from South Asia can begin this conversation. This conversation is not going to happen from Western world, because today there are two designs in the world. One is an American design, which is based on capitalism, consumption, military, and the design of the past, where US dominance matters, and the Chinese design, which is based on Belt and Road Initiative, where China wants to be in the position US is. We really need a third design. And third design of the world can only emerge from South Asia. which is rooted in bottom-up development, which is rooted in democracy, rooted in freedom, diversity, rooted in new model of economy. All I can say is this group can be very important with the leadership from Partha and all of the distinguished people I see here to begin a new conversation. Not that we have answers, but we must accept that the old conversations don't matter. And we must take the lead and begin new conversation. With this, I want to thank Partha for his leadership, for all the work he has done in the past at Boston Pledge, and he plans to do in the future, and the fact that he has been able to put together a great group of distinguished people, like I see on this panel, to have a broader conversation. And Partha, thanks for thinking of me. Thanks for inviting me. And it is indeed a privilege to be with all of you. And I hope to learn more. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. What a privilege. As you could hear Sam talking about the grand design, and that grand design could only come one and only place, which we call South Asia. We used to call it Indian subcontinent, whichever way you call it, that's not important. But again, the people that has served the region over the last 5,000 years in their celebration, I think we have to take the words of Sam forward. I think I'm so delighted that Sam has been with me every day. Sam, I think about you every day because you have been the source of inspiration for many of us. Now, today is actually a very special, auspicious day. It marks the beginning of the 125th year of another very special leader which subcontinent has looked up to, is Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And, one can go on talking about Netaji, and we will never do able to hold up the candle to the great personality he was from within and from outside, from the east, from the west. He really single-handedly shook up the world. Unfortunately, during the time of independence, he was not with the nation. Time of partition, he didn't have to see the struggle of, he didn't believe in the partition at all. But I'm very lucky that we have with us a very old friend of mine. We went to school together, and his father and my father did law in England at the same time. They were both barristers. And he is the grandson of none other than very famous lawyer, Subhash Chandra Bose, who was the elder brother of Netaji Bose. They were very much together. I've been to Surjo's home next to Woodman Park in the tennis courts. And Surjo has been a great friend. So he, in a very short call, have responded to join this very important event. He lives in Hamburg. He runs a very successful IT company, which is called BIT, Bose Institute of Technology. So BIT has double meaning, as you know, in the world of IT. Bits and bytes drive the world. So I'm glad you have joined. And more importantly, Surjo also has taken, like Sam, a tremendous amount of leadership in connecting Europe with India. He has organized hundreds of missions between Germany and India. Speaks perfect German, though I have not tested that as yet, but I could believe he speaks perfect German. And he goes to Japan a lot, given Netaji's relationship with Japan. And he's currently the president of Deutsch-Indisch Gesellschaft. I wanted to practice my German a little bit, which stands basically Indo-German Association of Hamburg. And so with that, I'd like to invite Surjo to share a few thoughts, particularly in a very auspicious day, which begins the marking of the Netaji's 125th year anniversary. Surjo.
Partha, I don't know what to say. It is very overwhelming what I can feel. Your august company here is not just impressive. Well, I really at a loss to start somewhere, but I'll take the easy way out for me. Let's put it that way. I don't want to go into any complex subject. Sam Pitroda has really explained quite a few things that we have to think about. Now, today being the 124th birth anniversary of Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji, as he was called, maybe I'll say a few things about him. But Partha, I mean, we went to school together. Partha was a couple of years senior to me. His younger brother was my classmate. Unfortunately, we lost him at a very young age. But then it's good that we at least have kept up contact. And yes, and what I've seen till now, it's a great job what you're doing. I got bits and pieces over the years, but I really didn't know what exactly you have been able to achieve. Now, coming back to Subhash, maybe a few things which are not that common, let's put it that way. When he became president for the first time in 1938, for the Congress president, Congress was a platform at that time, not a political party as it is today. He suggested the formation of a national planning commission. And he made Jawaharlal Nehru the first chairman of the planning commission to plan for an independent India. I mean, at that point of time, people were talking about politics, about freedom struggle, non-violent or violent, whatever it was. But nobody thought of reconstruction of an independent India. He did. And one of the first things he said, well, that time you had 330 million people in India. He said family planning. And that didn't go down well with his colleagues. God knows what. I mean, a lot of people had. I've overshot your 120 seconds.
No. Yeah, carry on.
20 seconds.
Carry on.
Okay. I mean, Partha told me 120 seconds. I said, well, I'll try and see how I can compress it.
No, please.
Yes. And the other thing he said was remove casteism by law. That was really something which none of his colleagues would accept. Had we done that then, we would have had solved the caste problem. But forget that. Now, when he was in Southeast Asia, because we've been talking of Southeast Asia, when he was fighting for India's freedom with Japanese help, he was not just fighting for the freedom of his own motherland. He was fighting for the freedom of all the subject nations of South Asia. He was very close to the Philippines, to, of course, Singapore, we know, Thailand, Burma, Myanmar, and all these countries. And it went so far, although he had Japanese help to build up his Indian National Army, the Azad Hind Force, and fight the British or the Allied forces. He asked General Aung San, Burma, said, if you have to, then fight the Japanese for your freedom. So, I mean, it's something which is very, very rare. An anecdote here, see, when the Thai Prime Minister was introducing Subhash Bose to the people, he said, for years we have studied Buddhism. For years we have practiced Buddhism. Today I present to you the living Buddha. And that was how he saw Subhash Chandra Bose. Mamoru Shigemitsu, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister of Japan under Tojo and also after the war, he called Netaji the hero of Asia, not just India. He said hero of Asia. I'll go back a bit to 1941, 42 when he was in Germany. In 41, in the beginning of November, on the 4th of November, to be exact, the Free India Legion, which was set up 2 days before that, decided to call or hail Subhash Chandra Bose as Netaji. So he was called Netaji for the first time in Germany and not in India or in Southeast Asia. And Jai Hind, which we use regularly, is also a greeting which was formulated then. So an Indian national anthem, Jana Gana Mana, was born in Hamburg on the 11th of September. It's our 9/11, a positive one. 11th of September 1942 in Hamburg when the Indo-German Association was founded for the first time. And I happen to be the present president, so there's a lot of burden on my shoulders, but I don't know whether I can carry it that well. But I don't want to take too much time because I was actually sort of squeezed in, and I don't want to squeeze out time from the others. So, and I have to take your leave very soon because I have another session which had been planned earlier. So I would like to, I wish the whole of Southeast Asia could be together in a form like, the European Union, maybe. We have certain organizations in place, but and India and Pakistan, Bangladesh, these three countries, can you imagine, had Netaji lived, we would have been one. We would have saved so much money on arms and ammunition and fighting each other. It would have been a different and more powerful nation than we can even envisage. But thank you all. And Partha, I really don't know what to say. Thanks a lot and all the best. And let us keep in touch. And I would like to thank all the other participants and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Surjo, thank you very much. I still remember your days in late 50s. That face keeps coming back to me. And I thank you for reminding me of my brother. He would have loved to hear what you said today. So it's very emotional for all of us. But you're right, if Netaji could have continued, we would have talked about one region as one, which he fought for, Mahatma Gandhi fought for, Vivekananda spoke on, and hundreds and hundreds of great leaders that we look up to expected that one day this region would be, as Tagore used to say, Bharat abar jagote shobai shreshto asana labe, which in translating to English, one day Bharat that time really meant whole of South Asia one day will take the most prestigious position in the Assembly of Nations. So I think in reverence to all these individuals that we're talking about, and not only in the last 100 years, but last 7,000 years, I put together a presentation to launch a journey. I would call it launching a journey. So one side we have to understand, as Sam did beautifully, the world is getting redrawn, world has to be redrawn. Surjo touched on Netaji's vision, including what I would say, the great work he's doing. And then I want to also be very realistic to show how poorly we are doing in the region. It's a shame almost. And I think it's important to look at the numbers. And then we have to redraw what is the future. So in that spirit, let me pull up a presentation that I have worked on. I was talking to my wife, Akiko, that this is perhaps the most difficult presentation that I will ever make, because it has got so many different dimensions to it. Yet I want to limit my time to 20 to 30 minutes to talk about 5,000 years in 20 minutes in a deeper fashion. Is not easy, but why shouldn't we take the challenge? So I'm talking about very much in line. I didn't know what Sam would talk about, but imagining a new world for South Asia, new model for South Asia in an era of uncertain economic equations. And that's exactly what Sam spoke about. And in the process, could we, this is a question mark, could we uncover the hidden assets of the region to trigger what I will call a bottom-up socioeconomic surge? And that is the spirit of the discussion. This presentation I've designed is dedicated to millions of such children in South Asia. Already I've got tears in my eyes. They're sharing limited amount of food. They're waiting for us. They're waiting. What are we doing? And it is also in reverence to the 7,000 plus years of rich heritage, whichever way you look at it, and also giving attention to how outside philosophers have appreciated this region. This is from Romain Rolland, a Nobel laureate, a French philosopher. He said, if there is one place in the face of this earth where all the dreams of living men have found a home from the very earliest days when man began the dream of existence, it is in India. So obviously this India is the India that it used to be before partition. So I give credit to all of South Asia, that it could be a home to serve the dreams. And then I've designed this presentation in the spirit of what, again, Sam was talking about. And this is very important because I feel the region is illiterate, and I'll tell you why. The illiterate of the 21st century will be not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that comes from Teufler. And on one side, we have the base of the pyramid where illiteracy is quite common, unfortunately. But at the top of the pyramid, I'm not seeing the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. We hang on to our old ways, as Sam was talking about it. And in the process, the region, let me not talk about the world, has remained kind of marginal. Now, on the other side, we have to remember, this is a very important picture for me. And when I go to China, I all the time look at this picture. And China has begun to reclaim its past. It's 18% of the global population, is about 16% of global GDP. But if you look at South Asia, it is 24% of the population, but only 4% of the global GDP. India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan put together. Now that is itself is a challenge we have to rise. The region has to rise. So in that spirit, I'd like to cover three fundamental points. One, very much in line with Sam, I like to sort of develop a picture of where is the world going. And I would like to make a case, yes, there's indeed a need for a new paradigm, and it is an opportune time for South Asia to offer that paradigm to the world. It is indeed an opportune time. Second, I will take a deep look at South Asia. And there, as we will all agree, the performance have been marginal, if not dismal. Clearly, there's a need for us to reimagine our fundamentals and get unconstrained with the deeper and broader perspective. And I'll cover that. And finally, I'll talk about leadership. We need leaders who could develop enlightened synergies, not get limited by borders, but cross the borders, build the bridges, and in the process, address the issues which are unaddressed, unearth the assets which are not touched, and most importantly, uncover the possibilities which have not been yet realized. So I'm going to cover these 3 points. So the first point I want to make is the world, and I want to give a very quick picture. This is a very important picture for me, and exactly what Sam was talking about. But I will use, being a management consultant, only analysis to make my points. So on the y-axis, we're looking at the population density of the world. And on the x-axis, you're looking at GDP as a percentage, export as a percentage of GDP. In the both axes, between 1900 and today, 2018, as you could see, we have grown 5 times. In other words, world is more dense, we are more connected. So obviously the lines that were drawn 100 years ago, 70 years ago, 200 years ago are becoming irrelevant. And given that we have become dense, we have to learn how to live with each other. Population density has increased. And indeed, if you look at the coronavirus situation, it proved that we are connected. The virus has spread very rapidly. Good ideas also could spread rapidly. So in that spirit, I would like to take a look at what's happening at the world. And I see there are fundamentally 5 different, very powerful forces at work. One, again, Sam touched on it, is a geopolitical disorder. And if you look till about mid-90s, there was an order. There was a tension between Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, and there was the triad, US, Europe, and European Community, and Japan, the NATO. And OPEC was on the side, exerting its power on the basis of energy. The rest of the world, and China was kind of the sidelines. India's discussion never really came up in the global platforms. But when you look at today, all those equations have been broken. So that's a good sign. The old architecture is broken, a lot of tension. Though European community has expanded, but as you could know with the Brexit, there are a lot of tensions within the community. The relationship with the United States and China, unfortunately, is not good, but together they make up 50% of the global economy. And of course, the Russia-US relationship has always been in a state of transition, state of turbulence. But the message is that there is no order today. It is very disorderly, and the old architecture is getting deconstructed. And on top of that, if you look at the world today, there are multiple hotspots. Each of the hotspots are powerful enough to create the Third World War. From Korean Peninsula to the Brexit, to the ethnic tensions in Nigeria, the Taliban's in the Middle East crisis, then of course the political crisis as we saw on January the 6th, it is not yet over. You never know when it will emerge again. So indeed, there are a lot of hotspots around the world. The world is looking for a new type of leadership. I so much agree with what Sam had to say. There's a need for a new design. And I didn't know that Sam will be talking about this point, but clearly we are on the same page. And at the same time, as you could see, the share of world GDP is shifting. We are right now in a space where the share of the Eastern economies is going ahead of those of the Western economies. And we are in a literally at the crossroad, which has a particularly very important meaning. And particularly important to realize that China, which used to have 2% of the global GDP in 1980, moved up to 7% in 2000, 20% in 2020. The target is 25% in 2050. And who knows, by 2080, my estimates are it could very well be about 35% of the global GDP. So we have a neighbor in South Asia, which is going to become a very important market, going to become a very important force. And we have to have a positioning. It's nice to have a prosperous neighbor, but we have to have a strategy. What does that prosperity in China mean for South Asia? And I've not yet heard that discussion. It's not important to look, as Sam was talking about, situations as adversarial. We have to find opportunities as others rise. Now, this is an interesting chart for me. I plotted the center of gravity of the economic gravity of the world from 180 till what it might be 2025. Now, the days when India and China were very powerful, as you would expect, the center of gravity was very, very close to South Asia. It gradually moved west till in around 1950, it was right in the middle of the Atlantic between the United States and Europe. But with the rise of Japan, rise of Korea, then rise of China, it started moving back towards Asia. So this is also, I see as an opportunity that as the center of gravity comes closer, what could South Asia do? And those are the questions that we have to keep in mind. At the same time, again, Sam touched on it, we have three fundamental challenges, which I call the 3E challenges. One is declining trust in institutions. What we saw in January 6th, what we see all over the world, in Turkey, in Hungary, even in China, Hong Kong, India, different parts of Pakistan, the declining trust in institutions, that means institutions are not being able to deliver. The ecology, the climate change is serious, and the gap between rich and poor has continued to increase. Now, these 3Es are global problems, is more visible in South Asia, and we have to work on it. And the biggest of all is this picture, which I think would be the challenge of the 21st century. Now, if you look at the last 200 years, the debates have been between the free market, capitalism versus socialism. And economists have debated whether capitalism is good, socialism is good. But as we go down, there's a third group of countries which has emerged. Again, so happens in Asia, led by Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, which I call strategically guided economies. Is not really free capitalism. There's a strategic guidance, but free markets are working. And clearly this region, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, which we call East Asia, has become very important. But the big question would be, as people are losing trust in capitalism, we saw the Occupy Wall Street movement in 2008, 2009. If you look at the way the politics of the United States is emerging, there's a clearly distrust in institutions. On the right side, people have lost faith in socialism. But on the other side, when we talk about state-owned capitalism or socialistic capitalism, whatever you call it, there's also a question of fit between the free market capitalism versus the orange area, which I'm calling strategically guided capitalism. So as a result, the US-China relationship has become tensed because US believes China should leave the free market totally free. But on the other side, the role of the government is to provide the platform so the free market could succeed. So there would be some fundamental changes in the making, which we have to be very conscious of when we think of South Asia. But then came COVID-19, which has kind of reversed some of the elements that we have celebrated over the last 50 years. What you're looking at, the size of the bubble is the size of the trade, global trade as a percentage of GDP, as you know, has continuously increased. And what we are looking at, degree of liberalization, which is degree of market orientation versus degree of openness. And almost every country moved towards the right-hand corner. But with COVID-19, some of the instincts changed. People started talking about self-reliance, nationalistic sentiments became stronger. There's a sense towards nationalism, closing the borders, and that could, of course, derail much of the developments that we have seen. Some good, some not so good, but clear that there's a turbulence in the making. And could South Asia take advantage of, if it's a strategic way I look at it, but it's not advantage of, could South Asia offer an alternative to the world, which on one side, self-reliant, on the other side, part of the global economy. So that leads to me the other point Sam touched on. There's some very powerful micro-level forces taking place. The convergence of technologies, artificial intelligence, hyperconnectivity. And in the process, indeed, new business models are emerging. So if I put all of them together, I see very interesting tension developing. And macro level, as we discussed, there are several forces at work. The big would be the conflict of isms, capitalism versus socialism, globalism versus nationalism, democracy versus autocracy, these tendencies are emerging. On the micro level, you see convergence of technologies. But what is more interesting, there's an increasing tension between macro level requirements versus micro level requirements. And that's what Sam touched on. When you look at hyperconnectivity, if it only benefits the top of the pyramid and the bottom of the pyramid is left out, particularly as we saw with COVID-19, then I think we'll see a bigger turbulence. So the connectivity between macro and micro has to be thought through with a new perspective. And that's where South Asia, and if you look at the Indian philosophies, what Mahatma Gandhi was talking about in Sarvodaya in terms of village level development, it could indeed create a new world. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And then we do not want to let down how historians have looked at this region. I find this very touching, so I want to share with you. It is already becoming clearer that a chapter which has a Western beginning will have an Indian ending. And by Indian, he meant South Asia those days, if it is not to end in self-destruction of the human race. At the supremely dangerous moment in history, the only way of salvation for mankind is the Indian way, which is the South Asian way. Now we have to understand that. You know, the Western philosophers, particularly from Germany, England, France, have continuously reminded us that. But somehow we have not put in the effort to understand what is it that we must celebrate. So that's my first point, that we have come to a point in history where, again, I'm using Sam's word, what is the alternative design that South Asia could offer? So to do so, we have to understand where is South Asia. So I'll give you a quick picture. And unfortunately, the picture doesn't look that great, but that's why we're meeting, because if everything was great, most probably this meeting was not necessary. But it's important to understand, because often there's a feeling, even the Western TV media puts China and India in the same breath, next superpowers, but that's not true. If you look at this picture, GDP per capita, on the x-axis, y-axis is the growth. The golden age period is where China, Vietnam, Turkey, Kazakhstan are, where you have growth, you're in the $20,000 club per capita. You're still growing 8 to 10% a year. And then, of course, as you grow and become richer, the growth drops, as you could see the richer countries. But if you look at Bangladesh, Bangladesh is doing a bit better than India, by the way. Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, they're way behind. But fortunately, the red zone, which is basically poorer side of the GDP per capita, began growing. And there's an opportunity it can move into the golden zone. That's the time when you see the brands, you see bottom-up development, which we have seen in some of these countries. And the question is, could we make that shift? Now, that's where I think this picture becomes very important. If you look at the Gini index, which is, as many of you know, is the gap between rich and poor. Bigger the index, more is the gap. Unfortunately, if you look at India, Pakistan, particularly India and Pakistan, this gap is increasing, is higher than what it should be. Normally, people suggest it should be around 25% is acceptable. But being poor and having a gap, Sri Lanka is even higher, I think is something that we have to think of, how to think of what I would call the inclusive development. Now, this is what I find most interesting. You're looking at the wage rate of various nations and the size of the labor pool. As you could see, South Asia is extremely left because we are poor, our wage rates are low, the richer countries on the right. But what I find interesting that though we have low cost, large population base, our balance of trade is negative. And that is unacceptable. That if we have poor labor, low cost labor, we should be able to sell more than we buy from the world. And if you look at all the countries in South Asia, the balance of trade is negative. Whereas if you look at the rise of Japan in the 50s and 60s, South Korea later on, China now, Vietnam, Malaysia, all of them has positive trade balance. And that is a very big scar in my mind, that we have these people waiting, we are not training them, we are not feeding them, and we are buying more than we sell. That means there's something wrong that we have to fix. And this is the picture of India. I don't have to go through. And indeed, as a result, other Asian regions have gone ahead. When I was looking at 1950, India was poor, but it was richer than many of the Southeast Asian countries. It was slightly richer than China. But today, all the nations of Asia has gone ahead, except the South Asian countries. Sri Lanka was way ahead of China, is falling behind China, but doing better than India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Nepal. So this is something to worry about, something to think about. And why so? I go another step deeper. If you look at the productivity of land, and I've particularly looked at the x-axis as the population density. So more dense you are, more dear is land. And I looked at the y-axis, which is agricultural productivity. Look at where Pakistan, India, Bangladesh is located. It's high population density, we know that. But the productivity of land is 6 times less, 1/6 of that of China. The China's population density is much lower, but still is something to worry about. In the same spirit, when you look at manufacturing productivity, I plotted many nations, but if you look at China and India, China's productivity per unit labor per year is about $15,000, $16,000, as opposed to that of India is about 5,000. I looked at Bangladesh, is also about 4,900. Pakistan is about, the numbers were not very clear. So I think we have a fundamental problem that people are not productive. And I'm not saying that we have to match Germany or United States. They're all way up on the right. But at least could we start inching? And in fact, the slope of the curve, I plotted multiple years here, is not that great. So it goes back to the fundamental question which Sam raised, the human development. And I will look at nutrition, sanitation, inspiration, pollution, education. All of them ends with TION. And you will see first that if you do not have a country which is served with nutrition, this is a very important chart. I was shocked that only 9.6% of the population of India, 12.7% of population of Pakistan, Bangladesh looks good, maybe because of fish, 23% population, they are an acceptable diet, others don't. So if 91% of the country is not well fed, how could the country be competitive? It's a very important point. And we do not talk about this subject. that we have to fundamentally redesign the nutrition of the country. Similarly, if you look at Human Development Index, look at where South Asia is located. India is 130, it used to be 129, this year it became 130, Bangladesh is 133, Pakistan is 154. Unacceptable out of 180 nations. China is 85, inching up. It used to be 92 years ago, now 85. This year, people are saying it will be about 80. But I looked at multiple measures: access to water, doctors per thousand, access to sanitation. In every case, South Asia looks good. And on the right side, which is more important, when you look at corruption index, there also we are pretty bad. It's 80. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, corruption is high. So to me, that means the basic human needs are not met and common people are not getting inspired. Because if everyone knows the nation is corrupt, how would you inspire the common people? Where would the productivity come from? And how much time we are spending on talking about these fundamental points. And on top of that, the pollution level of Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, India is very high. This is number of particles per million cubic feet. It is unacceptably high. If you look at access to water, the red zone means bad, yellow means good. The little part, yellow parts are very, very small, little bit in West Bengal, little bit maybe in Andhra Pradesh, but most of it is deep red, which the crisis is very high. And then we looked at the availability of water in 1975, it was about 3,000 cubic feet of per capita was available, cubic millions. Now it has dropped to half of that, and it's going to go down. So we have problems. Now we look at the hospitals, the healthcare. Look at the number of beds per 1,000 people. Minimum requirement, way below minimum. And all the countries are in South Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. Now, on the other side, the water requirement, I'm showing you the water, what is required, the brown bar versus the blue. It would be about half of what we need. So obviously we have a challenge. So I plotted again the healthcare sector. I will not get into the detail, but the degree of preparedness measured by doctors per 1,000 population or million population. I looked at hospital beds per million population. Together, it creates the y-axis, and the x-axis degree of vulnerability, which is per function of population density and the age. And as you could see, India, Bangladesh are in the most vulnerable area. And then people are expecting the number of difficult diseases, infectious diseases will increase. This is not my analysis done by economists. And the most vulnerable areas are the deep red, Eastern China, and South Asia. So if I put it all together, as goes back to again what Sam was talking about, where are we spending the money? As a percentage of GDP defense, Pakistan spends more money on defense, 3.97%, than 3.2% on health. Bangladesh 2.3%, but with limited budget, it's hardly anything. China spends 5.4% on health, 1.88% on defense. But the interesting part, because China has grown, is 1.88% is $261 billion in defense, as opposed to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh together adds up to about $85 billion. So these are serious challenges. And unless we talk about it with care, the point Sam was making, that let's forget the borders. We have to focus on the sanctity and value of the humanity and get out of the politics of the borders and create a new concept, new construct. And as a result, I think the lesson that I'll take from the second part of my point is that we have to move out from a left bottom corner, which is negative energy, focused, being myopic and narrow, being transactional, thinking of zero-sum bordered thinking. We have to move towards this area, the positive energy. And that's the fundamental requirement of our times, particularly for South Asia. And it's a great opportunity for South Asia to show to the world how to manage diversity of thoughts, how to manage heritage, how to solve problems. And that's where should the focus be. Because when I go back to 180 and look at the share of GDP, the orange area at the top is South Asia. It used to be 32% of the global GDP. In fact, I went back farther. I went back with a lot of assumptions. I realized in 500 BC, during Buddha's time, the share of South Asia's GDP used to be close to 40%, down to 4% today. It's not acceptable. And we are not talking about it. You know, people from South Asia are heading up Googles and Microsofts and Pepsis, you name it, IBM. But what does that mean? That we are not solving the real problem. So my first request, based on the second part of my discussion, let's forget the 75 years of failed experiments and division. Let's celebrate 5,000 years of intellectual, spiritual, and cultural ferment, including the experience of friction and fusion, because that is important. Friction creates energy, fusion creates possibilities. So last 1,000 years with the Mughal invasion, the British, there was a lot of friction, a lot of fusion, but let's look at it positively, that many cultures have come together. And that leads to my most important point. What shall we do? So my point is leadership. We have to identify enlightened strategic synergies. That's why we have this particular session. This is the first of many we will do together. And obviously I don't have answers. I have laid out some possibilities, but as you could see, they are all based on analysis. It's not off the cuff. A lot of discussions, a lot of opportunities to think about the problem for a long time. Again, I want to go back to a couple of observations people have made about the region. So to paint the new picture, we have to respect how people from the West, people like Tagore or Gandhi or Netaji have looked at these places. And somehow we discard that. We have to pay much more attention. This is Mark Twain talking about India. India, again, when they say India, they really mean South Asia, is the cradle of human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, and the great-grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most constructive materials in history of man are treasured up in India only. Now, what are we doing to uncover that? That's what I mean by hidden assets. Same look at what Albert Einstein has to say, that this is the place which taught us how to count zero and infinity. And it has been the fundamental of scientific discovery. So I think the point I would like to make, we have to get out of the original, the last 75 years. We have to think of a new S-curve. We are at a point of inflection. And as, again, Sam, you touched on it, it is not a matter of tweaking. It is a matter of thinking about the future with a new vision, with a new possibility, and keeping in mind these children. They don't care about borders. They're waiting. And there are 200 million of them, 300 million of them. Our corporate world has faced us. You know, I've addressed Associate FICI, CII for years with Sam. In fact, the way I met Sam first was if you remember, Sam, in a meeting in Delhi where PhD was organizing. It was in 1988. And I feel all our talks, we have talked about it, has gone wasted because we go back to the old way of doing things. So we cannot afford to tweak. We have to look at this region with a new perspective, and that's what I'm going to offer. And again, it's my humble offering, but it's the way to begin the discussion. First, we have to move from an exploitative relationship with nature. It's how we have exploited the people at the base, how we have exploited the nature, how we have exploited the water tables, how we have exploited the forest. We have to move away from it to developing an enriching relationship with nature. That's the first point. And to do so, we have to take advantage, three advantages I see, which only South Asia could offer to the world. Only South Asia could offer to the world. And we have to realize that. One, what I call the diversity advantage. The diversity of language, diversity of traditions, diversity of greenery, all the way from Kashmir to Sri Lanka. The time zone advantage, which I think I'm converting a negative to positive. 70 to 80% of this region has been untouched by the industrial revolution, by the capitalism which Sam was talking about. That's an advantage. So we do not have to reprogram this individual. They have not been programmed. because they've been living a life almost same for the last 1,000 years. So could we draw the new picture? And then the final, what I call the wisdom advantage, which is going back to all the spiritual, intellectual ferment which occurred in the region for the last 5,000 years we saw in the video. So these are the three fundamental advantages we have to bring together to create what I would call innovative synergies. Now, how do we do that? First, we have to create a mindset to be able to make uncommon connections. We have to bring multiple colors, multiple fibers, multiple cultures, multiple ways of thinking, multiple faiths together to create a fabric, to create a rope which is strong, which would create the future. And in this process, I'm looking at this region with three strategic initiatives. One, Sam, again, you touched on it. I feel Sam has seen my presentation, which he has not. But since we talk the same language, one is inclusive economic development, which is how to reform the region's socioeconomic activities while reducing income back and balancing trade. You know, balancing trade to me is very important. That if we cannot use our people to sell our products and ideas to the world more than we buy, that means we are doing something wrong, particularly when we are poor. Second, build up global brands based on the South Asia's heritage assets, both soft and hard. If people are talking about Ayurveda and yoga and Indian Vedic philosophy and all the different philosophies, why are we not packaging it to create new industries? And in fact, the new industry which is emerging right now is the spiritual industry. And could we do something? And finally, the most important part is build up a knowledge-based system. And again, Sam worked on Knowledge Commission, but I see the Knowledge Commission work could be extended to create what I will call the human care system. And to me, that means nutrition, that means sanitation, that means education, you name it, and we have done a good job. And in the process, build up the self-confidence of the region. See, today, one of the problems I see from top to bottom, people are not confident. They are seeking approval from outside. Satyajit Ray is good only when someone in Paris appreciates Satyajit Ray, and then the Calcutta movie theaters gets filled up. On your own, being able to appreciate your own person, that ability is what you have to cultivate. So if you look at the strategic triangle that I'm talking about, inclusive development, reconstruction of heritage assets, I'll go fast down. I'll lay out some of the fundamentals that we have to do. I've created a strategic game board for South Asia. That some of the areas we have to do more and better of the same, but with a new vocabulary. Some places we have to fundamentally reimagine the future. And without getting into details, let me lay it out. They could be, first I would call type C industries. We should create three fundamental economies across the region. I'm calling it green economy, blue economy, and gold economy. You could suspect what they are. Green, we have to create a bottom-up green economy, blue aqua economy, gold economy. Then we have to move to heritage systems engineering. You know, we talk about system engineering, but how to package the heritage, culture, philosophy, mind industries. You know, so far we have served the physical and intellectual part of the human system. But the mind is also a part which has not been served. But much of the Taxila Nalanda work was on the mind, development of the mind. And in the EDSP, we're talking about it quite aggressively. Then the type D, I'm calling re-engineered food and beverage. It is a shame that the nutrition of the country is so poor. We have to re-engineer. We have to encourage the food and beverage industry to come up with new concepts. And as a result, we have to look at the new technology, the technology of connectivity, artificial intelligence, to basically create a new approach to primary education where everyone would get educated in the region in their mother tongue. Primary healthcare, farm management, and water resource management. In absence of this, there's no point manufacturing cars. There's no point manufacturing planes, no point talking about defense, because when the base is weak, fragile, the top could collapse. And that's what the situation is. The one area that I would like to touch on, and then I'll try to finish because it's taking more time than I expected, but is the human care. This is how we look at healthcare. We diagnose when someone has a problem, we treat, and most of them do not get treated because we do not have enough hospitals, enough doctors, enough nurses. So I would like to move to a new concept, which I'm calling human care engineering. This is how I feel very emotional about it, because we cannot offer them the doctors. Doctors are here. Look at the US administration. Murthy is here. Every hospital you go, you'll find 3 or 4 doctors from South Asia, if not more. So we have limited supply, but the region is not attractive for doctors for some reason. So the problems are there, which I do not understand why that's happening. But could we work on what I'm calling prevention 1, prevention 2? So the need for doctors and hospitals is significantly decreased, and then post-treatment. And this is what I'm calling not anymore health care, but what I'm calling human care. And I'm using the term human care engineering, which includes lifestyle management, basic education, hygiene, which we have neglected. How to lead a clean life. That should be part of the primary education. So in the process, the load on the hospital system is decreased. And that's where we have to bring in the power of IT. That's why we have to extend. I will not get into the details, but as you could see, I have a full game plan of how the whole healthcare could become human care, how we could take advantage of digitization. And in the process, we have to solve a fundamental problem. I did not plot Pakistan and Bangladesh. They are in the same region, but this is a shame. With literacy rate and life expectancy, the region is extremely poor, even compared to war-ridden Iraq. Look at the rest of the world, South Africa to Vietnam to Malaysia. That's a very important strategic gap. And somehow it doesn't get discussed. This is the real gap. So the human care system should bring in the new world, and at the center should be education, human care to connect the green, the blue, and the gold economy. So I've got some pictures, I'll go rapidly, that we have to create a South Asian program to connect the rivers. We have a lot of rivers, the Indus River, the Indus Valley Civilization, the Gangetic Plain, the 2 cradles which the foreign, the overseas people have looked up to at the base of civilization. Now these waters are drying. What could we do? How could we connect? So I think that should be an immediate opportunity for the blue economy. The gold economy, we should move away from fossil fuel. So bring more purity to solar, wind power, and geothermal. I've laid out what are the opportunities where, similar, and create a national South Asian infrastructure to connect the solar with the wind. Similarly, in the agro sector, let's bring in IT, artificial intelligence, to increase the productivity. These are some of the ideas from China. China, in fact, is using drone very effectively, so much so that they're literally saving 90% of the water usage. And a country where water is running out, which is South Asia, India, Pakistan, I think is all the more important. Similarly, we should create an industry which is based on recycling. As opposed to left-hand side, we have to move on the right-hand side. We have to create an industry to manage waste. So there are lots of opportunities, and this creates jobs. This creates new paradigms which the world would look up to. And these are opportunities of our time, and that's what we have to do. The key is being able to connect the need side, necessary side. I'm just using one example, human care, with the solution side, with the technology. So our technology strategy has to be very much oriented to serve the needs. And in the process, I hope a new system would emerge. New system, or the third system, as Sam was calling, will get redesigned around 3. One I'm calling human care engineering, new agro-based system, which includes the green, the blue, this gold economy. And then the other one, which people do not talk about, but is very important, culture and heritage wear. Now, there would be always new terms, which we have to give birth to, and that would help us to move from exploitative relationship that we have with nature, with people at the base of the pyramid, to an enlightened relationship. And that's a fundamental shift. And that's why I think the education at the top would be very important. The key would be to bring what I will call awakened intelligence, so we can connect our farmers. someone in Peshawar maybe speaks Urdu, someone in Manipur speaks Manipuri. They will speak in their own languages through the phone, but they will be connected with the cloud. They'll be proud of their language. Because I speak Manipuri but do not speak English or Hindi, he should not feel that I'm not part of this country. He's very much part of this country. And that's why we have to use the power of AI. I call AI awakened intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. And then I will use with this 3 requests that I have. One is we have to focus on human care engineering to increase productivity. We have to create the green, blue, gold economies by using the power of AI for the base of the pyramid. And then build on the 5,000 years of spiritual and intellectual ferment. We should not lose that, reprogram that to create new industries, which the world has not seen, but is something to offer to the world, very much in line with what Sam Pitroda has challenged us to do. With that, I would like to humbly thank you very much for giving you a full picture of what it could be. And again, keep in mind that we are talking about serving the 200 million people who remain unserved and unearthing the 5,000 years of heritage which remains unearthed. So thank you very much indeed.